Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carb and Fasting. Now, for those of you who know this channel, familiar with what we stand for, you know that we primarily promote the low carbohydrate diet and fasting, be it intermittent fasting or extended. Our logo is nutrition for optimal health. Now, we know that to achieve optimal health, we cannot just cut out our carbs and do the occasional fasting and assume that we're going to be, in a place where our health is, in optimal range. So I often tell the people that I coach that the oils we consume have a big impact on your health. So today's guest is a researcher who knows all about oils. Tucker Goodrich, welcome to Low Carb and Fasting.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Tucker, we are going to talk all about oils, the good, the bad, and the ugly. By ugly, I mean some of the ugly, and in fact, they are ugly consequences, health consequences of the so-called bad oils or the unhealthy oils. Tucker, before we start, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience, telling them a little bit about your background, professional background, and how you got into nutrition research?
Yeah, well, I got into nutritional research because I was dragged in kicking and screaming. It was a topic I had no interest in except to avoid it. I had a mother growing up who was on Weight Watchers, and I watched her roller coaster and just came to the general conclusion that most diets were nonsense. And then I was a technology expert on Wall Street for a large hedge fund and largely self-taught in that field. It was at the time one of the top 100 hedge funds in the world, so it was a pretty big organization. And in my late 30s, I started getting sick. I wound up, when I was 38 years old, spending 4 days in a stroke ward for what was initially thought to be a stroke. I was unable to speak or see normally for about 5 or 6 hours, which is not typical for a stroke, but we won't get into that. And then a couple of years later, I came down with acute diverticulitis, which is a perforated colon, which put me again into the hospital for several days. And there were a number of other hospitalizations that all, in hindsight now, were diet related. A couple of years later, I came across a researcher who opened my eyes to the impact that diet could have in health, which in hindsight, you would think would be obvious. But I just assumed that if I followed the dietary guidelines, that probably that was the right thing to do. And what I found was that it was definitely not the right thing to do. And by ignoring most of the dietary advice, I put my problem-solving skill set to use and started doing my own research and in concert with my doctor in some cases, and discovered that all of my health problems were stemmed from my bad diet, and which was following the dietary guidelines, and that when I fixed it, all of them went away and I was able to fire my doctor. And that was 12 years ago. So I've been in, near perfect health for 12 years, as much as anybody can expect to see, with the occasional dumb move. Stand here with a big cut on my leg from slipping on a rock on a hike this weekend. So, nobody's in perfect health, but it's just been night and day. And I've, I started, my colleagues at work started asking me, they saw the difference in me and they started asking me what I was doing. And I started realizing that what I had learned was pretty powerful, and I started sharing it with people, and here I am.
Well, we were grateful that you started sharing it, because I think it was a wake-up call to all of us. So to me personally, I didn't know much about oils. Yes, everyone talks about the bad oils, but no one really explains. No one looks into the science of what harms they cause, and so what's so bad about them? In fact, that's a question I get commonly get asked by the people I coach. So why is this oil bad? And I told them, I've got the right person. He's coming on my podcast to explain it all to you. But the Tucker, let's go back a little bit. You mentioned that your diet was bad, but in fact, it wasn't really bad. It was a sort of a wheat-based diet. But no, you were using whole wheat, and you obviously you were health conscious. But it was bad at the same time, right?
Well, I referred to myself as Mr. Whole Wheat to my daughters, and I ate lots of whole wheat. I ate lots of salads. I, ate a bit of red meat, a lot of fish. When I started fixing my diet, I discovered that I was in fact getting most of my fat from vegetable oils. I hadn't set out to do that. It's just kind of the way it works in the United States if you're not really paying attention. And I remember this moment when I was sitting in the hospital with a perforated colon, and the surgeon came in to talk to me. And he said to me, well, no more fatty fried foods for you. And I looked at him like he was nuts. And I was like, I can't eat that stuff. I haven't been able to eat it for 20 years. It makes me sick. And he just kind of shrugged and, gave me some antibiotics, which was the right thing to do at the time. And I followed the advice for people with diverticulitis, which is to eat more fiber, and which in my case meant more salads with seed oil rich salad dressing and more whole wheat. And I got sicker and sicker and sicker until 6 months later, I had to get a colon resection, which I was told would be curative, and it was not. So a couple of years after that, I figured out how to fix my diet. I found out that taking seed oils out, which was the first thing that I did, made a huge difference, and also revealed to me that I had a massive gluten intolerance, and combination of those two things triggered all of my symptoms, as I learned subsequently. So, for instance, I could replicate my stroke-like symptoms if I accidentally consumed some wheat. I would lose the ability to talk. I would lose my vision, partially lose my vision. And, so needless to say, I'm very diligent about that.
Did you have to go did you have to have surgery for colon surgery?
Yeah, I had a sigmoid colon resection, which is about 8 inches taken out. Luckily, I had a very excellent surgeon who did, suffice it to say, it's amazing. I mean, it was an amazing experience, not one I would recommend to anyone, but it was an interesting learning experience, how resilient your body is. He took 8 inches out of my colon, sewed it back together, and 2.5 days later, I was at a pool party, drinking beer and eating hamburgers on doctor's recommendation. And it was, a testament to both my pain tolerance, because I took as little drugs as I could, and to the surgeon's ability and knowledge that I was able to recover. Typically, that's a 6-week recovery.
It must be a daunting thought when you think that had you not intervened at some point during that time and changed your diet, perhaps you would have had to go through several more surgeries. What would happen to your colon eventually?
Well, you know what? I remember there was one day where I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought to myself, you're looking old. And I was just like, all of my parents and grandparents, my mother's still alive, she's in her 80s. All of my, my father and all 4 of my grandparents died in their late 80s or early 90s. And here I am, 41 years old, repeatedly hospitalized, and thinking to myself, you're not going to make it. I was like, you're going to run out of colon if they have to keep cutting this thing out. And, that was actually one of the most remarkable things. When I fixed my diet, I probably lost 15 or 20 years of visual age. That's why everybody at work started saying, what are you doing? Because it was just over the course of 2 months, it was a dramatic change. I started getting carded at bars again. I mean, it was it was remarkable. And yeah, it was, I was, the surgeon was quite, both doctors, the neurologist and the surgeon, they were both clear that I was in a really dire strait, and that, the acute diverticulitis, if it's not treated immediately, can be fatal fairly quickly. And let me tell you, it is unbelievably painful. So yeah, it was scary.
So what were some of the first interventions you made? You cut out your whole wheat, your favorite whole wheat?
No, that was not it. I was following a researcher's work, Stephan Guyenet, and at the time he was very anti-seed oil. And so one day I was down at the cafeteria at work at the end of the salad bar, and, healthy salad. And I looked at all the squeeze bottles full of the various salad dressings, and I thought to myself, these have got to be the cheapest, crappiest oils known to man. And what happens if I just stop eating them now? Right. So I put some vinegar and some salt and pepper on my salad and stopped eating seed oils. And at that point, I had had chronic irritable bowel syndrome for going on 16 years, the predominant symptom of which was chronic diarrhea. I mean, I was very active, and I would have to carry a roll of toilet paper in a backpack around with me all the time, because I never knew when, I'd have an emergency. And that resolved in 2 days. 2 days, 16 years of illness fixed in 2 days. And that was actually one of the things that I'd asked the gastroenterologist about when I was in prep for surgery, if this procedure would help me with this problem. And he just shrugged. So the next thing that happened was, I was, 20 odd pounds overweight, nothing terrible, but been putting on about a pound a year, typical. And over the course of the next week, I realized that I just lost interest in eating carbohydrates. I had tried going on a low carb diet before, and I'd never been able to get over the carbohydrate cravings. This time I just literally forgot to eat carbohydrates for a week. I had no interest, never occurred to me to do it, just didn't. And then at the end of the following week, I had a sandwich, went, back down to the cafeteria, got a sandwich on whole wheat bread, of course, and had a horrible reaction to it. This was another of Stephan Guyenet's things. And it was honestly why I thought he was a bit of a loon. I said to myself, wheat can't be bad for you. I'm Mr. Whole Wheat. Look at me. Lying in my hospital bed, kind of ironic in hindsight. But so then I was like, wait a minute, maybe I have a wheat problem. And the following week, I intentionally avoided wheat, and then had a couple slices of pizza because some guys in the office bought a pizza, and it put me on the couch. I thought I was having a heart attack. My chest was pounding. I had a head rush. And that was, those two things are the main triggers for me. I mean, spicy food will also do me in, but, that I don't think is so surprising. I mean, pepper spray is a bioweapon, and if you eat it, you shouldn't be surprised if you have negative consequences. I love hot peppers, but boy, they don't love me back. And if you put the three together, that just absolutely nukes me.
That's interesting. So, so some of these symptoms you mentioned, are they typical symptoms of wheat intolerance, or was there something else going on with you?
Well, I do not have the genetic background for celiac disease, the HLA haplotype. I got tested for that. I said, I said I worked with my doctor. I went into my doctor shortly after I started doing all this stuff and told him what I was doing and that I was adopting a high-fat, low-carb diet. And he said, Tucker, I'm very concerned about you. You're pre-diabetic. You have high cholesterol. You're a bit overweight. This is not really. And I said, well, not anymore, doc. Here, let's get on the scale. And he said, I'm really concerned about this. And I said, well, that's why I'm here. You are going to tell me if I am killing myself, and we will do this experiment together. And I had to tell him what was the correct cholesterol test to run, the NMR lipoprotein, instead of the standard panel that he did. And he was great because he would go, you know, when I shared the research with him, he would go and confirm it. And, you know, so it was very much a partnership. And his, right before I fired him, his final comment to me was, "You're in great health. You're going to live to 100. So kudos to him for, you know. And then several years later, my father became a patient of his with my blessing. And I sat down in his office with my father, who was at that point in his 80s and in pretty poor health. And my father said, you know, "Doctor, what should I eat?" And the doctor looked at me and he said, "You should do what your son tells you to do. He knows what he's talking about." Mm-hmm. And, you know, that had major benefits on my father, for my father's health at the end of his life. So where were we? So the gluten thing. Oh, so yeah, so I did a lot of experimenting with both of those things and realized that, you know, I can tolerate a little bit of seed oils. I can't tolerate any gluten. And, you know, and if I leave them both out, I can pretty much eat whatever else I want, so long as doesn't have too much hot pepper in it, and I'm fine. And yeah, sorry. So the health benefits. The other big health benefit was sunburn resistance, which was kind of a surprise and is something we should go into as we go through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we will. That's in my notes too. I'd love to go into that. So let's start categorizing oils. So the healthy ones and the unhealthy ones, and maybe also explain why you put them in these groups.
Okay, so
healthy oils for cooking or eating raw, which ones?
The criteria for a healthy versus an unhealthy oil is how much polyunsaturated fat they have, primarily omega-6 polyunsaturated fats. As a practical matter, most oils don't have much omega-3 fatty acids because they tend to go rancid very quickly and they smell like rotten fish. So that's obviously not good to put in your processed food that's going to sit on the shelf for 6 months because it will stink when you open it. So an unhealthy fat is a fat with a lot of omega-6 fats, and a healthy fat is a fat that doesn't have much. At one extreme, you get things like rice bran oil that's probably 60% omega-6 fat, and at the other extreme, you get things like coconut oil or beef tallow that have a tiny little percentage of omega-6 fats. And the problem with omega-6 fats is that because of their molecular structure, they're very unstable and susceptible to oxidation, which is what your grandmother would have called rancidity, right? Rancid fats are toxic fats, period, end of story. So you do not want to eat things that go rancid. That is what causes the negative health consequences of seed oils. And apparently all processed seed oils contain from 400 to 1,000 times the level of rancidity as a living organism would contain. So arguably all omega-6 fats are rancid when they come out of the factory, which is something I learned just recently and was quite surprised to find out. Now, how do you make it worse? You cook with them.
Yes,
And considering that these are cooking oils, not being able to cook with them is a bit of a problem. Cooking oils are recognized by the International Association for Research in Cancer as a type 1 carcinogen based on consistent evidence from animal models and probable evidence from human models. They cause lung cancer, and they cause a different type of lung cancer from what smoking causes. And this type of cancer is most consistently seen in non-smoking women who do a lot of cooking, and it is increasing around the world. In fact, Sarah Hallberg, who I'm sure you know of, just died of lung adenocarcinoma, which is the type of cancer that's caused by cooking with seed oils. I don't know anything about her health history but that is the type of cancer that's caused by cooking with seed oils.
Sarah Holberg of Virta Health. I might put their website in the bottom as well. It's useful for the audience. So which ones are we talking? You mentioned the rice bran oil. What others? Let's name a few others that people commonly use.
Anything. So I call them, okay, so let's back up a sec. There's vegetable oils.
Yes.
Right? I try to distinguish between fruit oils, which is made from the outer fruity part, right? Like an olive has a pit. Olive oil is generally made from the outer part of the olive, not the pit. The pit's the seed, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing with avocado.
Avocado oil.
Same thing with avocado. Coconuts are a weird plant. You can find them described as a seed, a nut, or a fruit. So let's just kind of put them aside. They're a healthy oil, but botanically, they're kind of bizarre. I mean, you look at a coconut and you say, boy, it looks like a seed to me. So, yeah. But because they're tropical, they have a different fatty acid balance. So the bad ones, the obvious bad ones are corn oils, soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, basically anything. Safflower is made from safflower seeds. Sesame oil is problematic. And unfortunately, the fruit oils, olive oil and avocado oil, are all often adulterated with cheaper seed oils. So if you're going to cook with those, I use them sparingly. I buy mayo made with or avocado oil, and I use olive oil sparingly. I'll go through maybe 16 ounces of olive oil a year. And mostly I use pastured butter, and then coconut oil, depending on the flavor I want in a dish. Mm-hmm. And then beef tallow. Lard can be problematic also because of what pigs are fed, right? These fats bioaccumulate up the food chain. So if you feed a pig a lot of seeds and seed oils to fatten them up, which is what they do, then they're going to concentrate those oils in their bodies just like we do. And what you wind up eating is not so much a pig as a bag of grain and seed oils, right? And the fats can change, can dramatically change, go from if you feed pigs coconut oil, they're going to be about 2% omega-6 fats. If you feed them soybean, they're going to be up to 30% omega-6 fats. So they can actually be worse than something like canola oil. Canola oil is one of the healthier classic seed oils just because it has less of the omega-6 fat linoleic acid. That's the main troublemaker here.
I believe canola oil is the rapeseed oil in the UK. I'll double check that. It is.
Canola is the same as rapeseed. Yeah, canola is a brand name for Canadian rapeseed.
Rapeseed, which is very commonly used in the UK. And right. It does carry, in fact, rapeseed oil carries the healthy symbol by UK health, heart health right. Symbol.
Heart healthy, yeah, right.
Heart healthy is a symbol, yeah. So where do nut oils fit in here, like peanut oil and so?
It's pretty much the same. They're all seeds. The exception there are macadamia nuts, which have a very low omega-6 content. Macadamia nuts, I love. They're crazy expensive. My understanding is macadamia nut oil is even more expensive. But, you've got to, I like to distinguish sesame seed oil has a pretty high omega-6 content. It has some pretty effective antioxidants. Historically, it was recognized to cause people to get ill. But, if you're I use sesame oil as a flavoring, and that's a couple drops. So I don't really worry about that, right? I would be very careful about deep frying in any oil, right? And pan frying is actually even worse in terms of having the oil go rancid.
Mm. You mentioned
and there is, by the way, a great website run by a friend and colleague of mine called Seed Oil Rebellion, and they have lots of information on good and bad oils. I think they call them the hateful eight, which is a term Dr. Kate Shanahan coined. And then they have the 6 oils that you want to cook with, the simple 6.
So we're mainly vilifying these oils because they contain very high levels of omega-6 fats,
Right.
which make these oils go rancid very quickly. So is there any difference? Let's say if someone is eating peanuts and they're getting their omega-6s from peanuts as opposed to peanut oil. And that's just peanut as an example, but the oil as opposed to the actual sort of fruit or nut or seed itself. Any difference there?
The problem, yes, there is a small difference, right? The oils in the peanut are not going to be rancid, right? The peanut is designed to protect these oils, right? I mean, that's its mission in life, is to promote the growth of a peanut plant, right? So when you extract the oils from a peanut, there is going to be some process of rancidity. The problem is when these oils get into your body, they also go rancid. So they may start off as less rancid, but when you consume them, they will be incorporated into the tissues of your body and go rancid there. That, as you might imagine, is a bad thing. And we should talk about some of the rancidity products. Now, interestingly enough, to give you an example of the difference between a good peanut and a bad peanut, I recently learned that one of my favorite candies are peanut M&Ms. And I recently learned that a number of years ago, there is actually a low linoleic acid variety of peanut, a low omega-6 peanut. And the Mars company, the company that makes peanut M&Ms, committed 5 or 6 years ago to switch from the high linoleic to the low linoleic peanut, right? So now what did that mean for the Mars company, right? They didn't do this for health reasons. They did this because it extended the shelf life of these peanuts by 10 times. That's the difference in rancidity between a low linoleic and a high linoleic fat, even when it's inside the peanut. Right? So wow. I'm stoked because peanut M&Ms are back on the menu for me as a treat once in a while. They are pretty delicious. Okay. But I was really shocked to hear what a difference it made. And there is actually for years been a big push in industry to lower the linoleic acid content of a lot of cooking oils because these fats cause a lot of problems. I mean, the craziest problem is if these fats are so unstable that, let's say you have a fryer and you have a guy working the fryer and he's wearing a uniform, and the uniform is going to get covered with a lot of these oils, right, from the deep fryer. And he takes his uniform off and it's a hot summer day and he throws it in the bin. And then they take the bin out to the laundry truck and they're driving along. And guess what happens? The uniform bursts into flames because the oils are so oxidatively unstable. They also cause a varnish around the fryer and inside the kitchen, right? Which is, it's a varnish. So it's really hard to clean off, right? Mm-hmm. So they've been pushing for lower linoleic acid oils because of not even because of the health problems, just because of the problems they have in cooking with them, right? Mm-hmm. So it's been a big push in industry to try and fix these oils. They haven't focused so much, they haven't explicitly focused on the health issues. And I think a lot of it is just because they just don't want to admit it. But you can find articles in the industry journals. For instance, there was a paper that was done years ago looking at deep frying potatoes, French fries in oils, and noting that the oil breaks down into an aldehyde, which is called 4-hydroxynonenal, HNE. This is a highly toxic product, right? It is cytotoxic, meaning it kills cells. It is genotoxic, meaning it causes genetic mutation. It actually causes a mutation in a gene called the TP53 tumor protection gene. It is the gene in your body that helps your body defend itself against cancer tumors getting going. This is the most common mutation we find in the most common Western cancers, like breast cancer and lung cancer and skin cancer. And, the article kind of at the end of this paper, they said, look, these oils are breaking down into high levels of this highly toxic thing. Maybe we should, and it also causes obesity, just, to really put the cherry on top. Maybe we should be concerned about this. And, what'd you hear? Crickets. They will tell you, it's amusing because the Harvard School of Public Health, on the one side of their mouth, they will tell you to eat seed oils. And on the other side of their mouth, they will tell you not to eat fried foods. What are fried foods cooked in? Seed oils. So make up your mind. Are they good or bad for you? Right?
I'm interested, Tucker. So what makes the omega-6 oils? What about their structure? Because you did talk about their molecular structure. So what is it about their structure that makes them more prone to oxidation compared with omega-3 oils?
It's interesting. Omega-3 oils are actually more susceptible typically to oxidation, which is why fish go bad so quickly, right? What smell of a rotting fish is the smell of rancid omega-3 fats. The things that omega-3 fats break down into, the aldehydes and oxidation byproducts, are not as toxic as the ones from omega-6 fats. They are still toxic, but they are like several orders of magnitude less toxic. So, you should also avoid rancid omega-3 fats. Obviously, that's easy to do because you can smell them. Rancid omega-6 fats are used preferentially in processed foods because people don't really smell them, right? It gives a stale flavor. It doesn't smell, like a rotting fish. So people are still willing to eat rancid omega-6 fats in like a bag of potato chips. And if you ever have, pulled a bag of nuts out of your closet and you realize, oops, I put this in here last year, and you smell them, you will smell the smell of rancid omega-6. And it's just this kind of stale, flat smell. It's not obviously objectionable. So it's, the problem is the toxins that they break into are far more damaging to your body. They're two of the major ones, malondialdehyde and HNE, are both genotoxic. They both induce genetic mutations in vivo and are very implicated. I mean, HNE was originally discovered when they were studying cancer, and they kept coming across this molecule and tried to figure out where it came from and realized, it comes from omega-6 fats exclusively. So I talk about that a lot because it is a really good marker. And the only place that it comes from is from a fat that you can only get from your diet, right? So into your mouth, into your cells, breaks down genetic damage. And some of the common markers that are used for genetic damage are markers that are dependent on damage from oxidized omega-6 fats.